And Kendra, do you have control of your mute? Kendra as well, Stephen.
I was going to say, for those of you speaking, don't mute yourselves again because you can't unmute you. You can't unmute yourself. I would have to do it. And I'd rather just watch and listen today.
Great. Wonderful. So thank you all for joining us today for our event on creating equality and community in our food systems. I'm excited about this topic and to be able to present it with such a wonderful panel of people we have. To start, my name is Kiah Jordan. I'm one of the founding board members for Sustainable Change Alliance Foundation. And we are a group of local professionals who care about the impact in our community of our dollars. And we do that through Sustainable Change Alliance by engaging and providing events and education and opportunities to members to learn about them and get involved in those opportunities. We believe in using capital, private capital, and nonprofit and the public sectors to address environmental and social problems. I definitely would like to thank all the other members of the SCA board and Linda LeBrock, our executive director, for all the hard work in putting this together and keeping us all in check along the way. We couldn't do it without you, Linda. And I'd like to thank our sponsors. We have some founding sponsors, Maps.com, Argyle Capital Partners, and UBS for helping put this on. Our platinum sponsor, Nixon Peabody Law Firm here in town, who supported the foundation. JP Morgan Chase as our gold sponsor, and our silver sponsor is Brashears Insurance. If you're not a member of Sustainable Change Alliance, or this is your first time joining one of our calls, we would encourage you to take a look at our history of events we've had, and as we post upcoming events, and consider joining us as members. This is something that we have seen grown significantly, both on interest and members over the last number of years, and we want to continue to provide really fantastic opportunities and insights into what's going on in our community. We have so much great stuff going on, and really enjoy sharing that with the members and giving unique opportunities to be a part of that. As Stephen mentioned early on, we are recording this call. You are all on mute other than the speakers and panelists, just for all of our ears to not be distracted by outside noise. And we do have a chat room, so feel free to send questions through the Zoom chat. You can post them to everyone and we will pick them up, or send them directly to me as well, and I will work them into our conversation. So today we are going to be talking about resilience and community in our food systems of Santa Barbara. And to accomplish that, we have an awesome panel of individuals that are part of the Santa Barbara County Food Action Network. Shakira Miracle is our new executive director, who we are very excited to have on board. Kendra Wise works with the Santa Barbara Public Health, and Alegra and Lacey are our co-chairs. Alegra is with CEC and Lacey is with the Food Bank. So we're going to be able to cover a broad range of topics, which are really exciting, and not just the food systems, but also how our current environment dealing with COVID is impacting this food system, and with some unique experiences and insights, and I'm sure lots of questions from all of you for that. I'd love to start with a little bit about the background of the Food Action Network in Santa Barbara and how it came about. Alegra, would you mind sharing with us a little bit about the Food Action Plan, what that is, and how we got to the Food Action Network being formed last September?
Sure, yeah. Is now an okay time to also share some food system facts, just to ground us in reality? Okay.
And
perfect.
include a little bit about you as well. You're with CEC, and what do you do, and how did you get involved?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the Food and Climate Program Manager at Community Environmental Council. So I work a lot on food system resilience within the context of climate change, and how we can build resilience both within the food system in order to adapt and mitigate against climate change impacts. So yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really thankful just for the theme of today's discussion around equity and justice. It's clear to all of us that the recent anti-racist protests have brought to light and really highlighted how important it is to talk about race and how that factor can play such a power in each person's ability to access resources and thrive and live. So just want to show some gratitude for that. So I will absolutely talk about the Food Action Network and the Food Action Plan, but first just wanted to share some simple facts about our food system that I think are pretty illuminating. So as you probably know, the agricultural industry is the #1 contributor to our county's economy. It provides up to about $1.5 billion in production value every year. We have over 50 fruits and vegetables that we grow. At the same time, almost all of that is exported. So picture 2 trucks on the 101, one coming in full of produce, one leaving with produce. And so in that way, our system really is built for import, export, and not built for keeping local products local. And so at the same time, we also have 63% of our county's school children on free and reduced lunch. We have 3 times as many fast food restaurants and convenience stores as we do local supermarkets and produce stores. So we simultaneously have this abundance of food and a real inability to access it. And that has a lot to do with the way our supply chain is built. So the current Food Action Network and the plan that's guiding our network was catalyzed in response to those realities and the inefficiencies of those realities. So we have the Food Action Plan that was published in 2016. And that's really kind of what we see as the blueprint for improving our county's food system. So the plan identified 16 different goals, looking at how we produce our food, how we distribute it in our county, where it's consumed, how the waste is managed, developing food policy and food education. And we have made a lot of progress in implementing that plan. Through a partnership with the Santa Barbara Foundation and other funders, we funded dozens of projects that implemented different parts of the plan. So an example is SBC Food Rescue, which works countywide. That started off as a simple food rescue pilot in Buellton. We did a veggie prescription pilot with Sansom Diabetes Clinic and Fairview Gardens. Lacey knows more about that. And then also helped launch a farmer's market up in Lompoc. And those are just a couple examples. And there are many more that I'm happy to share more about. And I just gotta say, partnerships made those happen. We could not have done that without hundreds of volunteer hours and late night emails of making those things happen with dozens of people. So fast forward to 2020, we have lots of wins that we can point to, but it also became clear to us that those projects were not necessarily connected and they weren't necessarily coordinating as much as they could be. So we're now focused more on kind of building that collaboration, building a web of collaborators and partners that can break down these institutional silos that we see and leverage new resources and build partnerships between folks that hadn't necessarily worked before. And so from the beginning, much of the efforts were spearheaded by the Community Environmental Council, the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County, and the Santa Barbara Foundation. And that was great leadership. But I think we're at a point now where we're needing to really, in order to truly build countywide community ownership over the plan and over kind of improving our food system in general, we're hoping to expand and diversify our leadership. So we have with our new network, we have 13 different government agencies and nonprofits and businesses on our kind of informal board who are guiding the network's implementation. And we're setting goals for the next couple years. And part of that is really trying to build food network membership from the ground up. So creating opportunities for every business, every farmer, every institution to play a role in making our food system better. So that's what we're working on. Happy to share more about our next steps, but don't want to take up too much time. So I'll stop there for now. You're muted.
I guess if I mute myself, I can't get back in.
Nope.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
Kiah,
Alegra.
don't mute yourself going forward.
I think we're all going to have to learn this lesson
won't.
multiple times today.
Lacey, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background, how you got to the food bank, and your role now as a co-chair in this Food Action Network as well?
Sure. Yeah, I would love to. My name is Dr. Baldivez. I am the Director of Community Programs and Education with the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County. We cover all the way from Nucoyama, Guadalupe, down to Carpinteria. And as you probably already know, the food bank focuses on some of our most vulnerable populations and creating food access and ensuring food access for those families and individuals. Right now, just in case you're not aware of all the action that's going on around COVID, our major focus has been around children and partnering with school districts to ensure that even with the school closures, children have access to healthy and complete balanced meals. And then we also have a strong focus on our older adult population, ensuring home delivery of groceries so they can stay safe in their homes. Kiah asked about my background, so just briefly, I did some studies at UC Davis and I worked with the US Department of Agriculture there. I was at the California Farm Academy, and what we found there was that we have a very high age, so an aging farmland ownership population. And so we were working to train beginning farmers and get them sort of an incubator type of access to farmland in order to transition farmland to the next generation. And so my work at Fairview Gardens, which was an educational farm, included food literacy, of course, but we also developed a program where we trained these beginning farmers and gave them an opportunity to launch their businesses. The result of that was a lot of beautiful organic produce, and through the Food Action Plan and some of their networking events, we were able to partner with Sansum Diabetes Research Institute, who was launching a vegetable prescription program for people in our community facing diabetes. So we were able to use the produce from the beginning farmers to fill those boxes for people trying to lower their blood sugar levels, and it was very successful. So that's what pulled me into the local Food Action Network here, and I have since moved over to the food bank, where I'm able to what I think is have a much larger impact across our county. I'm actually a local girl. I grew up in Santa Maria, so that's very important to me. And I get to work with a lot of colleagues here to continue to move those goals forward, like Alegra mentioned, in terms of ensuring food production in our county, food literacy in our county, and then moving people in our county who may be facing hunger into a state of health through food access from the food bank.
That's great, thanks. Kendra, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and the work you do here as well?
Yeah, sure, Kiah. So my name's Kendra Wise. I'm there's multiple of us. I'm a supervising environmental health specialist with the County of Santa Barbara's Public Health Department. I work in the division of the Public Health Department called Environmental Health Services, and we're the regulatory branch of public health. Our job is we do a lot of things, but the group that I work with specifically looks at regulating retail food facilities. So we're helping make sure that farmers markets, grocery stores, restaurants, hot dog carts, festival booths, mobile food facilities, food trucks all meet the standards outlined in California Health and Safety Code for consumer-oriented food agencies. So as a result, I've done a lot of work with our local business community in helping make sure that people understand what those requirements are, and the goal, of course, is public health and safety, right? We want the food that people to consume to not make them acutely sick, right? But the Public Health Department also has a larger mandate, and so I'm here representing sort of the broader agency as well today, is that we not only want the food that people eat to not make them sick, we want it to promote their health. And we want them to have access to food, have access to quality food, have equitable access to food, as we want them to have equitable access to all the determinants of health. So that includes things like housing and healthcare and education and, environmental factors like pollution. And so the Public Health Department's role is to help ensure the health of the community. Food just happens to be part of that. But it's a pretty important part. I think we can all agree that, you know, people eat 3 times a day. And if we're, let me put it this way, is our goal is for everybody in our county to eat a healthy meal 3 times a day, right? We recognize that that is not a reality for a lot of people in the county. And so we have a Department of Nutrition Services. They provide WIC support, women, infants, and children. So breastfeeding support, nutrition support, and services through that program, access to additional funding for healthy foods. We also help with folks who are eligible for CalFresh and other programs, access those programs. And we've worked for a long time in partnership with the food bank and other agencies to help you know, make sure that everything is running smoothly in terms of access to healthy food. So I'm here as a representative of that agency today. A lot of the challenges that we sometimes face when we're talking about equitable access to food sometimes runs up against regulatory challenges, right? Like if people want to enter the food system as an entrepreneur, for example, turns out that you need a health permit to do that. And for a lot of people, that can seem like a pretty significant obstacle, maybe not always financial obstacle, although sometimes it is, but also just a knowledge obstacle. Like how do I even do that? And so a lot of the work that my team and I do is focused on helping people in the community who are interested in food-oriented businesses understand what their options are. And there have been occasions when those options didn't meet the needs of our community. And so then as regulators, we have to look at, you know, what can we do with what we have, right? We can't necessarily just throw the regulations out the window and say, hey, go for it. But also, are there areas in the regulations where we're seeing regulations that don't meet the needs of our community? And if that's the case, can we help make changes to those regulations? And so a fairly recent example was Assembly Bill 2178, which our local Assemblywoman Monique Limon sponsored in the California legislature. It's called the Limited Service Charitable Feeding Organization Act. And it basically created a new regulatory, I guess, space for nonprofit organizations that were feeding hungry people for free, because they were being asked to meet the same standards, to meet, you know, commercial kitchen standards, which were appropriate for some of them, but not all of them needed that level of commercial kitchen use. And there was an access barrier for groups that were trying to feed people in ways that were safe from a public health standpoint. So a statewide group got together and said, hey, can we make a change that allows us to have regulations that support our community needs and still protect public health and are still fair for organizations that are doing this for profit? So we can also play that role as regulators, which is really, really, really exciting in lots of ways, to be able to think about community needs and think about if there are regulatory barriers or governmental barriers, and how could we address those barriers to help the community get what it needs.
That's great. Thanks so much, Kendra.
Sure.
And Shakira, you recently joined the Food Action Network as the executive director, recently back to Santa Barbara, but not new to Santa Barbara. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background in community building and then your vision for the Food Action Network and its purpose here now as a newly formed organization?
Yes, I would be thrilled to share about the network and its vision. So to start with a bit of my background, I think what I'll talk more about is recent to literally prior to this role. My role was to facilitate an initiative very similar in construct and infrastructure to the Santa Barbara County Food Action Network, with the goal of developing poverty reduction plans at the municipal, provincial, because this was in British Columbia, Canada, and federal levels. So a lot of the work that I did, although broad in terms of work scope, the important component was to be able to facilitate cross-sector stakeholder conversations and action plans around not only developing strategic policy, but then also in the plan, but then therefore the implementation. And I'm happy to say that prior to moving away from Canada back to the US, that the federal government created its first poverty reduction plan. The province of British Columbia, which was the last province in the country, also created a poverty reduction plan. And the most exciting, just in terms of my grassroots work, the municipal level in the community that I was in, endorsed and built a poverty reduction strategy into all areas of their community planning and policy, which is really important in terms of vision and execution Santa Barbara County with our food systems, because I love how Kendra talked about, and we can go into this later, but part of their role as regulators, because what we really want to do via the day-to-day work of achieving the 16 goals in the Food Action Plan is to ultimately create more of an upstream systems change process and development, so that we are creating new policies rather than sort of fixing the old, and therefore innovating on the ground and support all of those incredible people who are in the food system day to day. And by the way, when I'm asked, am I part of the food system? What does that even mean? The first thing I say is, do you eat? Okay, you eat food, then you are active and a participant of the food system. So in addition to the facilitation work, I'm also trained in challenge dialogue system. So I'm a part of that challenge dialogue system network. And why that's important is because we have a toolkit of how to create pathways to activation. Now, what does that mean? That's systems design language for you and you and you. Everybody watching here today can have a role. You probably are already activating areas of building resilience in our food system, which incidentally, when you ask me, what is my vision? Well, it aligns with the goal of the Food Action Plan, which is to build resilience in our food system county-wide. So that's a bit of my background and what I bring to the role. Ultimately, in terms of you're asking about my vision, which I had mentioned was in alignment with the goal of the plan, my work day to day is essentially the mission of the Food Action Network, which is connecting and aligning stakeholders through those pathways to activation that are ultimately achieving those 16 goals in the Food Action Plan. So I really encourage everyone watching, when they have some time, take a look at that plan and also go to our website, sbcfoodaction.org. Already amazing work that's being done. I'll talk a bit about that later, but I'm everything from food processing hubs to community kitchen scans. How can you take part in all of this? I can't wait to tell you. Thanks, Kiah. And thank you guys so much for having us.
Thanks. Lacey, as a major player in Santa Barbara County, the food bank, I'm sure, has experienced or seen some changes due to COVID in our food systems. Could you highlight or touch on some of the areas that you've seen that are maybe fragile, that needs focus, and what this has really exposed? And feel free, Alegra, Kendra, Shakira as well, to answer. I thought Lacey might have a great response with how on the ground you are in so many of these areas.
Yeah, thanks. I will kick it off and then open it up to others. In Santa Barbara County, normally our food insecurity rate is 15.7%. We compare that across the country, so it is actually on the lower side compared to some other states and other counties. So it's manageable.
Lacey, how do you define food insecurity for those that don't know?
There's a really brief questionnaire that's given, but it's generally, did you run out of money for food this month? And have you ever felt like you didn't have enough food to feed yourself or your children?
Thanks.
And then they would just answer yes or no. So about 15.7% is what we usually see. It's gone up just across households in general to around 20%, but has disproportionately affected households with children. Their rate of food insecurity is around 30% currently. Among older adults, we've seen the numbers go up about 2.5 times. Before COVID, we served around 1,200 older adults through our grocery program. And now, as of May, we served 3,300 older adults. And then I just want to touch a little bit on some of the racial disparities, just to put the numbers in perspective. Among white-led households, the food insecurity rate went up to about 18%. Among Hispanic-led households, 32%. and Black-led households 36%.
One of the things that we've observed too with COVID specifically in a food environment is that we have at least a bifurcated food chain. We have food that goes to the retail sector, but then there's a whole complete different section of the food network and food chain that goes to the wholesale and commercial sector, right? Restaurants. And it's very difficult. So the amount of food being produced hasn't really changed that much, but the amount that's been able to, it's been hard to move that commercial food over to the retail food sector. So we saw like shortages of certain things on grocery shelves. So even folks who could afford certain, foods couldn't get them because they weren't available, because that food chain got exhausted very rapidly with the restaurants closing and people having to eat more from home. And so that's been, I think, really enlightening for a lot of us to recognize that our supply of food is not necessarily easy to switch back and forth depending on external forces like COVID or environmental factors. So in that respect, it's not resilient in that respect, because we have all this food that, I think we all saw the images of like farmers plowing under their crops and livestock being slaughtered because there's no capacity for processing or storing it because it's a separate part of the food sector. So I think that's something to think about too when we're talking about food security and insecurity. There might be enough food, it might just not be making it to the people who need it, or they might not be able to afford it.
I want to add one thought on that. That was a great point, Kendra. Among people able to access foods, when we did see a little bit of that food shortage on the grocery store shelves, it did appear to be a bit of a privilege of folks who were able to get to the grocery store in time.
Yeah.
A lot of our food service and food prepared workers are considered essential, and thus were working during the day. So I know we saw even among our staff who, are running our warehouses, driving our trucks and forklifts, they were not able to get to the stores in time to get the foods that they need. So there was another little disparity there between food service workers and others who were less essential during the COVID response.
Mm-hmm.
Are there particular areas that you've seen that have been either a surprise around the fragility of it, that's kind of been held together and COVID is really breaking them down, or areas that have become a highlighted area for needed investment, either volunteers, financial resources? We've talked about transportation. Lacey or Alegra, you mentioned we've got big trucks going one way and coming back, and I think for those that were in town during the La Conchita mudslide, almost 2 decades ago, we experienced a shutdown, and I remember Vaughn's and Montecito was lacking produce and food and on the shelves. Where are some of those areas that we've seen that, I think we're all seeing some of the effects of shutdown, but where are some of those things playing out in our community that we need to be focused on for the next disaster, if you will?
I can speak to that briefly, and I know, Shakira, you have thoughts on this as well. Something that we saw with the debris flow and during the Thomas fire is that, like with COVID, the global supply chain is impacted. So our ability to transport food and get it to those outside of our county is shifted. And so what we have seen over the last few months with COVID is that local producers and people that do have local supply chains and local markets have needed to really ramp up their services. So the local supported, community supported fishery, Get Hooked, local CSAs, local farmers markets, they've had to double, if not triple, their production and their operations to meet the demand, because people do realize, if the grocery stores, if the shelves in the grocery stores are empty, where am I going to get my food from? So people are kind of jumping into this new place of needing food, therefore supporting local producers and local suppliers. So I think the more that we can invest in infrastructure that local growers and local fishermen need, the more resilient we'll be. And yeah, more to say about that.
I could not agree more. Couple of things to add to what Alegra's talking about. There is a common quote from UCSB Environmental Studies professor David Cleveland that I think is really important, and it hits home why the work of all of the partners, not only in the network, but on our food system in the county is important to emphasize. Talking about that truck coming in and truck going out, Santa Barbara County exports 99% of the produce it grows and imports 95% of the produce its residents consume. When I first read that, and it is also cited in the Food Action Plan, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a type error, didn't make sense. Okay, there's got to be some margin here that I'm not thinking of, or the context is out of place. Think about that for a moment. So whereas we're in this juxtaposition of a situation of scarcity, where we see on our television screens the lines to the food banks that are just by the thousands that were quoted out of San Antonio. And yet in the county, in Santa Barbara County, we are a county of abundance. And so the question then goes to, how are we going to more strategically, efficiently, effectively build in our infrastructure, as Alegra speaks to, the distribution, the supply chain itself, the systems that are needed, so that we can manage our abundance more equitably and much more efficiently, would be another word to add there. One other thing about specifics, when you're talking about some of the learnings that I'm hearing from our network members, for example, cold storage is critical. It continues to come up all over the county. What does that look like? It looks like meat producers who need short-term immediate storage, either nearby, on-site, or for transport so that they can get to customers. It's seafood so that they can, again, short-term, they can hold for processing, then they can process and hold for distribution. Emergencies. I would love to say that once we get past COVID, that all will be good in the world. We know that's not the case. We need to think in terms of repurposing for emergency response built into everything that we do, every project, every entrepreneurial venture. There must be space held for a pathway to repurposing for emergency response, short-term, as well as thinking long-term, how we can have partnerships for sharing of resources in similar situations.
Shakira, when you mentioned that statistic, is it about the import and export? Is that definitely produce, or is that food in general? Just because I'm thinking, you know, we have the salad bowl up in Salinas Valley, we have citrus and avocado and berries and all that. And I'm wondering, you know, if other states are not producing that, is there value in exporting all of that to them and then importing our, say, meat and grains that are less frequently grown here? I'm just wondering that statistic, if it is specifically produce.
So it's specifically to produce, but you bring up a very interesting line of thinking around how we can first put on our own oxygen mask and then put it on those of the people outside of our county and beyond. How can we leverage our abundance, correct? So when you think of it, so when you're thinking about investment opportunities, for example, we want to first solidify our systems within the county. What does that look like? There is a list. Contact me directly if you want to, guys. I've got a whole area of working group that we want to initiate. But beyond that, exactly, what is it about our very special Mediterranean climate that we have an array of very unique seafood that can only be harvested here? We have avocados. We have a number of citrus. So, I mean, I could go on and on. So when we're thinking about it's globalized localization is really how I'm hoping that some of this language moves into, where we are thinking about the localization of the systems and making sure, again, talking about those barriers locally so that consumers can get access to this incredible nutritious food in an equitable way. But in addition, then how do we scale some of our systems work and the infrastructure that we've built in order to then build out and become profitable in a more managing of abundance way of thinking. Thanks for that. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Oh, sorry, interrupted.
I was just, while we're on the infrastructure discussion, just wanted to put a couple of thoughts out there because I saw that Linda asked that. So yeah, refrigeration space is absolutely needed infrastructure. The other things we've heard that I personally heard are the need for community kitchen and community processing space, like Shakira mentioned. So if some farmer has 50 crates of lemons that they can't sell for whatever reason, where can they take that so that it can be processed and turned into marmalade or turned into lemonade? We don't have a community resource like that, that during times of crisis could be so useful. And the other thing that came to mind, given how prevalent rangeland is in our county's land use, and how cattle play such a role in our greenhouse gas emissions and just our culture overall as a county, there's a lot of interest in developing local cattle and beef processing facilities. So there have been discussions over the last, I think, like decade, talking about how to develop a mobile slaughterhouse that can move from ranch to ranch and provide local value added meat that could be sold locally. Right now, ranchers have to sell their beef in counties all over the state, and many of them at this moment are overtaxed and don't have the space to do that. So that's just one other thought to put out there in regards to infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we also should be thinking about when we're talking about produce coming in and produce going out is that we're also essentially importing and exporting water. Right, because produce takes water to grow, and we have water restrictions, certain concerns here on the South Coast, because we do have a limited water supply, and we're functionally exporting a lot of our water in produce, and then we're shipping it, so we're trucking it, right? So then we're also looking at things like diesel emissions to carry heavy produce to other places, and diesel emissions to bring produce back. And so, if there's a way that we can help balance out the produce, that we're, keeping what we need here and only exporting what we don't need, and only importing what we do need, that's going to help with an overall environmental impact as well. When we're looking at the water cycle as well, because that's a really important part of our ecology here and a really important part of our life here as well, is being thoughtful and mindful about how we use our water.
So just to add to that, one more thing, because it's really important in terms of opportunities for how people can get involved or investment opportunities. What Kendra speaks to, a regional low carbon footprint distribution channel. Right. That's what we need, is that system. For example, from Kiah to the coast, vice versa, but also serving and building food access in mid-county. So San Ynez, Paradise, even areas of Lompoc. So that's one piece. And then another project that is already in execution and we want to build out and scale regionally are mobile markets. So community-based access to food, but with a limited carbon footprint. So whether it's design of the mobile trucks that are clean, whatever that may look like, but that's another channel of investment.
So I have a question about the potential second wave of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Whether we've been operating on a shoestring right now with addressing the first wave, and can we handle a second wave? It's a great question. Love some thoughts on that. In addition, with about 15 minutes left, I don't want to get bogged down too deeply in the downside of all of this, because we have some really exciting things that are going on in our community. The whole reason we have a Food Action Network is because we've seen the potential and the opportunity that exists here. So I want to be able to spend some time on that as well. But if there's some thoughts on the second wave and how we can deal with that with already having stressed resources, go.
Well, we have had we've had 4 months crash course in what we need to focus on, right? I mean, I think one of the positive takeaways from our experience so far has been that we've seen where there are vulnerabilities, and that gives us an opportunity to strategically plan for how we're going to address those. And I have to give, a huge amount of accolades to the food bank. They have really stepped up and organized and coordinated and acted as sort of a functional linchpin for our community to try to make sure that people who are most in need are getting what they need. And I know that's been a tremendous amount of work. So, Lacey, you guys have done a phenomenal job there. And I think we can also then say, okay, well, based on what we know now, who do we, is who we thought was going to need our help the people who really needed our help? And the answer is, well, yes, but we've also have more nuance to that now, right? So if there's a second wave, we have more information than we did before about what we can expect people will need. And I assume we'll also get new information if that happens. So, I think that's not, I would never have wanted to get this information. Like, I would prefer to have never found out what happens in a pandemic. I think we all are there. But given that we're dealing with one, I think that's something that's going to be helpful moving forward. It gives us a better idea of what people in our community will actually need.
I can add to that really quickly before we move on. We did have a time period in May where the sourcing of food was getting very difficult, and we did have to put some restrictions on getting food out. What happened was the USDA responded with their CFAP program, which bought food from farmers, and then some big local distributors stepped in to support that distribution of food, pick up boxes for us and get them to us or to our partners. So the Berry Man was really huge in that. And so in kind of my dream world and my vision of what would happen in a second wave of COVID is that we would be able to funnel some of those federal dollars to our local growers because the crews are still in the field. Kendra, you could correct me on this, but when I spoke to one of the large growers, they said their transmissions that they've seen have not been among crew members who work together, but rather crews who drive to work together. So they have been able to maintain that safety in the field. And so directing dollars to some of our local growers and then supporting our local distributors to keep that chain going would be kind of the most immediate solution that I could see.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, like we mentioned before, like our CSAs, many of them have experienced just phenomenal growth, right? And they've had challenge scaling because they weren't really planning on having a 4-fold or 5-fold interest in their CSA. And so things that we can do to help sort of double down and invest on that, because the growth and development of networks that our local food producers, our community supported fisheries, our community supported agriculture, they can really help. That's a direct investment in our local food systems. And the other nice thing about those is that you don't have to be able to make it to a farmer's market in order to benefit from those food products. A lot of them are dropped off at community locations. So people who may not have access to go to the farmer's market or go down to the fisherman's market can still get that food because it's being delivered to local communities. And so I think that's important as well. If you don't have a car or you're working crazy hours, you can still get local food through a CSA or CSF, and supporting those particular models and helping those farmers and producers scale to meet the demand is probably a good use of time and investment as well.
I'd like to add to what Kendra's talking about. So one of the ways to get access from producer, farmer to consumer directly, especially if there is a second wave of COVID, and another investment opportunity is an online purchasing platform that is flat. Mm-hmm. So one of the challenges so many of our farmers had and producers was the admin cost of their own individual purchasing platform. Wouldn't it be ideal from a network perspective to develop an online purchasing platform that any producer could access, not taking away from their overhead costs, and consumers can go to one hub for purchasing their value add or their produce or their meats, their seafood. The seafood industry is actually our commercial fishermen and get hooked. It's the same concept, really. In addition to that, one of the definite gaps that was exposed that will come again in a second wave are vehicles for distribution. It hit the food bank. It hit a lot of the local growers They had suddenly all these customers, but they didn't have a way to deliver that food. And then beyond that, redirecting food service workers. So when our amazing restaurants throughout the county close, a plan in place that we don't have to do in real time because we know it's going to happen again for immediate repurposing, even reskilling. Food Rescue did a tremendous job. Alegra could speak to this on how they redirected local food service workers in the emergency response.
Who was that you were referring to, Shakira, who redirected the food service workers?
A partnership between Food Rescue and also if this was a Santa Barbara partnership or collaboration on the ground with the, I forget the name of the organization. They serve the homeless community in Santa Barbara, but the idea was that they partnered with local restaurants to create meals, prepared meals, then to serve those who needed food. Also, I see a question here, what is a CSA and a CFF? So the commercial, CSA. So what we're talking about there are, if you would like to order a food basket of organic food, some of us have deliveries at our local elementary school, for example. A CSA, and I'm probably not the person to answer, but I'm going to address it and you guys add to it or poke holes in it.
We have the acronym in the text chain here. So
Thank
it's
you. Community Support Agriculture. So what this is a compilation of, let's say, weekly, bi-weekly boxes of healthy, nutritious produce and fruit, or community supported fishery where you can have veggies, fruit, fish, either at a central location for pickup, or it can be delivered to your home. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Did I cover it?
Yeah, I think you did a good job. I think the other nice thing about the community supported agriculture is it's a direct marketing approach. So it's directly between the farmer and the consumer. And then the other thing is that typically they're on a subscription basis. So you sign up for a certain number of boxes in advance. That provides the farmer with working capital, so they don't have to worry so much about being cash poor. They have working capital to purchase things like seed and do the work they need to do. And then you sort of benefit from their skill and expertise, but if their carrot crop fails, it means you're not getting carrots, right? So you're basically, it's a way for consumers to sort of pitch in with the farmer and take on some of the financial risk of the farm as well. Although in my experience, there's been zero downside. We have a CSA, it's been fantastic. It's been very reliable. So I mean, I think that's part of it too. It's a way to provide farmers with some financial predictability in their what am I looking for here? In their jobs, in their endeavors.
Yep. So some of the exciting things. Fortunately, a couple weeks ago, we got to hear from White Buffalo, who's a major player also in the food systems of Santa Barbara, and the exciting work that they were looking to do and planning to do in the regenerative agricultural space. What are some of you seeing in your organizations or in other organizations and members of the Food Action Network?
Well, one thing I'll touch on, and I think Shakira was mentioning this, is this kind of new collaborative called the Community Food Collaborative in the county. And what it's kind of confusing, all these networks and collaboratives, but what it's really doing is breaking down these silos between production, distribution, and access. So it's creating a system in which local farmers are able to sell to local distributors who process it and turn the food into prepared food that can then go to hungry populations, seniors, and the houseless population. So oftentimes what we see is that those sectors are not connected and not collaborating. And so I think the COVID crisis has really pushed us to get creative and break down those silos that often keep us separated. And I think this is something that can be scaled. And it's very new and just kind of getting off the ground, but I think you'll be learning more about that. I think there was actually a cover of the Independent was about this, the Santa Barbara Independent.
Absolutely. If I may speak to very quickly, just some in real time opportunities that we're working on, and opportunities for collaboration and investment. We've mentioned them already. building out of what we are calling a community kitchen scan phase 2. So some work last year that was completed on identifying community kitchens throughout the county. And then the next phase would be to contact each of these community kitchens and beyond to identify what their cold storage current capabilities are, and then a memorandum of understanding in the future on an array of how we could either repurpose, either rent or in kind provide that space. But what we need is additional cold storage. It literally needs to be another layer in our food system that we can utilize. And then regional food processing hubs. Alegra spoke to this. So processing of, I mean, you can imagine curing, smoking, fermentation, freezing, milling of grains, for example, so that we build upon our local variety of nutritious food products. And then, of course, talking about the mobile markets, so the scaling within communities. And then beyond that, which I think will speak to the love language of many watching today, the ability to come alongside and help build business plans and create a secondary channel of income for a lot of these farmers and producers to create secondary products and also to help them with their delivery distribution. And at the end of the day, we want to do all this amazing work, and we need investment in our network to do that. So we're looking for commitments for growth stage funds that'll provide sustainability. We're thinking 5-6 years so that we can do the work that we're charged with, which is eventually, and I see it coming, guys, it's sooner than we think, but scaling our capacity so that we can truly be a resilient food system in our county.
Thanks, Shakira. I've had a number of people already reach out about follow-up conversations and contact, being respectful of how busy some of you are, and even having automatic replies that say, I'm busy solving COVID. Feel free. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Shakira. If you wouldn't mind sharing your email with
Absolutely.
the group
I'll put it
chat
in the chat
for
box.
people to reach out to you, so that there's some filtering to those of you that are so constantly on the ground doing so much work that we appreciate.
Yeah.
That would be really great.
And Kiah, I'm willing for folks, I'll put mine in there as well. If people have any questions about regulation, I'm happy to have those conversations. It's what I do, and we want to be supportive. Recognize that there's a lot of overlapping regulatory structures that can be confusing. And then I would be happy to be your guide if you're interested in anything you're doing with food has regulation in it. So give me a call and I'll put it up there.
Yeah, I'll advocate for that, where with public health, you probably don't want to ask for forgiveness. You want to ask for permission.
I'd much rather have the conversation on the front end. Yeah.
Kendra is not scary to approach about that. And I know, have benefited so much from your involvement in the Food Action Network, to be able to proactively think about and address these things. And so, let's not ask for forgiveness with regard to public health. That would be great.
Thank you. We appreciate that a lot.
One more thing to add in terms of how the SCA can best help. We talked about investment. We've talked about investment in the network. And also to keep in mind that a lot of stakeholders who are doing this incredible work need the lens of entrepreneurs. They need the financial sector. We have to have the financial sector in order for this to be scalable, effective, impactful, and long-term sustainability in mind across all 16 goals. Please consider coming alongside, whether it's joining the leadership, coming alongside and joining one of the working groups, implementation. If you want to launch one of these projects, please get a hold of us. We welcome you and we need you.
Wonderful. Any other parting thoughts? Really appreciate the time you guys have taken.
Shakira, if you're able to get some of their contacts, I would like to connect with Estrella about the access to disadvantaged communities.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you here. I hope you've learned something and have some wonderful takeaways and have a greater appreciation for what is going on in our community in the food systems and how we can all be active participants and intentional participants in it. So
Sure.
thanks and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation to join. Thanks.